One day, two nuns were driving down the road together, when all of a sudden the nun who was behind the wheel looked in her rearview mirror and saw a police car behind them with its lights flashing. So when she pulled over and the officer approached, she said, "Sir, I couldn't possibly have been speeding. I know for a fact that I was only going 19 miles an hour." The officer said, "Well, ma'am, that's the problem. The speed limit on this road is 55 miles an hour. You're going much too slow." But the nun said, I don't know how that can be. There was a sign we just passed on the side of the road. It said 19. The officer said, "Well, ma'am, that was the route number. This is Route 19. But the officer was in a good mood and was about to let them go when he looked inside the car and saw the nun in the passenger seat, who had this horrified look on her face, was white as a sheet, and was clutching onto the dashboard with both hands. The officer asked the nun who was driving, "What's wrong with her?" She answered, "I don't really know, but she's been that way ever since I got on Route 121. This morning, we're taking a look at a part of the story of Job. And Job is a story that forces us to think about how we make sense of the signs that we see in life. Especially when we see signs of evil and suffering. What are we to make of those signs? You see, Job was a godly man. In fact, the way the Bible talks about him, he was probably the most faithful person in all the world. Job was the sort of man who was in church every week. Every time there was a blood drive, he donated. And he drove for Meals on Wheels every morning, even on the snowiest days. Job was a good guy. There weren't any skeletons in his closet. And on top of all that, Job was a successful man. He had a bright, shiny new Cadillac in his garage, a state-of-the-art hot tub in his basement, and his children, they would have been the pride of any parents. Job seemed to have it all. But one day, up in heaven, God was talking with Satan, and God started to brag about Job. God said, "Have you seen my boy Job? There's nobody like him. Why, he does nothing but good. In fact, if you could try as you might, Satan, and you couldn't find one bad thing to say about him." But Satan said, "Ha! The only reason Job is such a Mr. Goody-Two-Shoes is because of all the good things he gets to enjoy in life. But if you were to take away those good things from him, God, he would turn on you in a second." And so God said, "Satan, I know you're wrong about Job, but go ahead and do what you said. Go ahead and take away from Job all the good things he has in life. And I know that in the end, he'll still be faithful." And so Satan went out and did what God said. Satan went out and took away from Job his family, his home, his riches, his health. Everything good that Job had in life, Satan took away from him. And at the end of this story that we listened to this morning, we find Job sitting on a pile of dirt, scraping himself with a broken piece of a clay pot, trying to bring some relief to the painful skin disease that had been inflicted upon him. And so the next 40 chapters in Job try to make sense out of all that. And the questions that Job faced are very much the same kind of questions that we face. When we see signs of evil and suffering, what are we to make of that? During the next 40 chapters of Job, what happens is that some of Job's friends come together and offer their interpretations of what's taking place. Most basically, they say that if Job is suffering, it must be because of some sin. That if he's suffering, it's God's way of punishing him for his sin. And to most of us, that makes sense. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, we hear about